Imagine stepping into a tense Senate hearing room. The bright lights, the nervous officials, the weight of billions in taxpayer money hanging in the balance. Then, one man leans forward, a plain-speaking senator from Louisiana with a disarming southern drawl and eyes that cut right through the spin. With 4 simple words, "I don't believe you," he turns the entire room upside down. That man is Senator John Kennedy. And today, we're breaking down his most explosive, most watched moments from 2021. The viral clips that had millions of Americans glued to their screens, laughing, cheering, and finally feeling like someone in Washington gets it. These aren't just political theater. They're raw moments of real accountability. Stay with me. You're about to see why his style is impossible to forget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, welcome. I agree with you, by the way, for what it's worth, about getting the money out on the streets, literally. See, I'm looking at your budget here. Your current budget is $12.5 billion. You're asking for $14.2 billion. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
That's a 14% increase. You want an extra $1.7 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. Explain to me why the American people would be better off giving you $1.7 billion than taking that $1.7 billion and spending it on infrastructure. I did a little math, and for $1.7 billion, we can resurface a 4-lane highway from Washington to Denver. So why are the American people better off giving you more money than putting it on infrastructure?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for the question. It's a great question, and I think the way I would think about it is the $1.7 billion increase to the budget, my budget, is an investment in infrastructure as well. It's an infrastructure.
What? I'm sorry?
Infrastructure investment as well. It's an infrastructure investment in the American worker in this country. It's an opportunity for us to look at, as I think about the Department of Labor.
Well, do you believe excuse me for interrupting, I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, we don't have much time. Do you believe that every expenditure by the federal government is an investment? What's the difference between an investment and an expenditure?
An investment is an investment in the future of workers. An expenditure is an expenditure in building a bridge.
Okay. Well, if you have a union background, which I respect and admire, if we took $1.7 billion that you say you need more to run your department, and we spent that on infrastructure, that's going to create a lot of union jobs, isn't it?
It's going to create a lot of jobs, but we're also not going to be able to educate the workforce that needs those new jobs that are going to be created off of that infrastructure investment of new bridges.
But they're already educated. The people building the roads are already educated. They're good at what they do.
Well, Senator Reid just mentioned of an issue around literacy in this country. So again, it's an investment in helping people to be able to be retrained and trained in the jobs of the future. I come out of construction. I worked construction as well. The construction industry that I worked on in the early 90s and late 90s is different than the construction industry of today.
Yes, sir. Let me stop you for a second. I don't want to get too far afield here into a history of the construction industry. I used to work construction too. Let me be sure I understand what you're saying. When my constituents call me and they say, look, you're being asked to raise taxes to pay for infrastructure, why, instead of putting $1.7 billion in extra taxes on us, why'd you give $1.7 billion to the Department of Labor? Why didn't you use that for infrastructure? Am I just supposed to say because the Department of Labor says they're going to make an investment? What metrics are you going to use this time next year to be able to prove to this Congress that your investment paid off better than $1.7 billion in infrastructure?
Well, before I answer that, let me just quickly go back to the tax question. I think the beauty for your constituents is that the infrastructure bills that's being negotiated right now does not raise taxes on the average American who earns under $400,000. So the average American is not paying for that.
That's not true.
Okay, well, that's not why I'm here today.
We just have to agree to disagree. Let me move on because I've got 1 minute left and I like to stay within my time. Does your agency conduct surveys?
As far as employee surveys?
Any surveys?
We do, yes.
Okay. Do you pay people
Pay the people to do the surveys?
No, to take the survey.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Well, here's what I'm asking. I'm not trying to...
I don't know. I don't know the answer
I
to
need
that.
your help finding something out. One of my constituents got this in the mail. It's a letter. I know it's not under your jurisdiction, from the Census Bureau. And they asked him to fill out a form on children's health. And he opened it up, and look what fell out. A $5 bill. And there's no reference in the letter to the $5 in cash he got from the federal government. What's this all about?
I have no idea.
Can you help me find out?
I will help you find out.
I
didn't get one of those letters.
Well, I filled out my census, my survey. I want $5. And I understand that the Biden administration is also sending people $40 gift cards.
I doubt that's from the Biden administration, but I will look into it.
I looked it up. It's on the internet. It must be true.
I will look into it for you, my friend.
Would you?
I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
All right, sir.
Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gosh, Mr. President, I wish I didn't have to give this talk. I think it's a bipartisan observation that unfortunately Americans are paying a lot more for just about everything. I asked my staff to put together some inflation numbers, and they're just breathtaking. Gasoline up 50%. Rental cars up 42.9%. You need a used car or truck, they're up 26%. A turkey, 20.2%. Bacon, 20.2%. Beef, 20.1%. Pork chops, 15.9%. Bedroom furniture, 12% higher than last year. Eggs, 11.6% up. Televisions, up 10%. Frozen fruits and vegetables, up 7.5%. Chicken, up 8.8%. Shoes, up 8%. Baby food, up 8%. Children's clothes, up 7.6%, and I could keep going. Unbelievable. Now, Mr. President, I believe in calling them like I see them. I think most fair-minded Americans know that President Biden is responsible for this inflation. You don't have to be Einstein's cousin to figure that out. But put the politics aside. The shame of all this is that the burden of these price increases are falling on the backs of the American people. And while Washington is obsessed with the politics of it, the American people and the people in my state have to bear the cost. A lot of people, Mr. President, as you well know, just can't afford to pay 50% more to fill up their gas tanks. They can't afford to have to stop and go arrange a bank loan to go to the gas station or to the grocery store. And unfortunately for Americans in my state and your state and across the country, here with winter coming on, the cost of heating homes is also going up, just in time for temperatures to fall. So the cost of heating is going up and the temperatures are going down. A lot of families are going to have to shell out up to 30% more for natural gas than they did this past year. Ask them if their income went up 30%. As our days grow shorter, the economic landscape, unfortunately, is getting darker. Thanksgiving is just around the corner. It's a cherished American holiday. But even the holiday that Americans observe in order to count our blessings is coming with new hardships. According to the New York Times, Mr. President, Thanksgiving 2021, and I quote, could be the most expensive meal in the history of the holiday. As I just mentioned a few seconds ago, frozen turkey is going to set you back 20% more than it did last year. If you want to enjoy, you like gravy with your turkey, well, get ready to pay 7% more for gravy. Maybe you don't eat meat. Maybe you're a vegan. Well, unfortunately, frozen vegetables are also going to cost you about 7 to 7.5% more. And the high prices only apply if you can find the food in the supermarkets. Some of these food products you can't find. You can't even find on Google with Google. There's no guarantee that the cranberry sauce and the sweet potatoes will be in stock come dinner time. Now, this is America. This is 2021. This isn't the Soviet Union 30, 40, 50 years ago. My God. Washington ought to hide its head in a bag. Now, the official general inflation rate is 6.2% higher than it was last October. And that happens to be the largest increase in over 30 years. But we all know, and I can tell you, real people in the real world who go to the grocery store and the clothing store and pay their insurance bill and go try to buy an automobile know that it is not 6.2%. It is a lot higher. Now, I need to ask a question, though. Are you really surprised? Are you really surprised that prices are rising when the Biden administration is printing money? When the Biden administration is exploding our debt? When the Biden administration is forfeiting America's energy independence? When the Biden administration is paying people to watch Netflix instead of to produce the goods we need? When the Biden administration is ignoring gridlock in our supply chain? American people aren't surprised. For months, the White House has turned gaslighting Americans about the inflation crisis into an art form, Madam President. White House officials pretend inflation, if you ask them, oh, it's just temporary. It's just a temporary problem. Temporary, a rat's rear end. It's actually a soul-crushing, job-killing tax on working Americans. That's what inflation is. Every time you go to the grocery store, your taxes go up. And inflation hits lower income and middle income families the hardest. The hardest. And anyone who doesn't believe that should ask Secretary Kerry whether fuel prices have grounded his private jet. Of course not. He's rich. He's got a private jet. He doesn't feel it. You know who feels it? The moms and dads in this country who get up every day and go to work and obey the law and pay their taxes and try to do the right thing by their kids and try to save a little money for retirement. That's who pays this tax that the economists call inflation. And this inflation didn't just appear out of nowhere. I mean, any economist with a pulse knows where this inflation came from. Inflation comes from too much money chasing too few goods. And when you have an administration, as we do with the Biden administration, that spends money like it was gully dirt, whose mantra is we can't possibly spend enough taxpayer money. There's just not enough hours in the day. Of course you're going to have inflation. Of course you're going to have inflation. Now, what's President Biden doing about it? Well, I've noticed that the Biden administration, when it comes to economics and other areas as well, they never make the same mistake twice. They make it 5 or 6 times just to be sure. So how's the Biden administration going to deal with this economic cancer of inflation, which is killing the American people? Their idea is let's go pass a spending orgy bill, they call it reconciliation, of epic proportions, chock full of welfare blowouts when we can't afford the social programs we have now. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And a White House official claimed earlier this week that the president's, he calls it $1.75 trillion bill. It's going to end up, we all know, being a lot more than that. He says it'll actually reduce inflation. Right. And those aren't hogs in the hog lot. Just wait. The fact is, and unless you were in the quad playing Frisbee during Econ 101, you know this is the truth. The fact is that massive government spending has kept workers on the sidelines and has fueled inflation. But the only comfort the permanent Washington types are sending to folks gathered around an historically expensive Thanksgiving table is that more, not less, more of the same insane policies are coming down the pipeline through what the president calls the Build Back Better bill. And I think most Americans call the Build Back Broker bill. Have you looked at the bill? I've looked at the House bill. I've started reading it. I'm probably going to go broke just reading the thing. Now, neo-socialists love this bill. They love it like the devil loves sin. But the American people aren't going to love it. Louisianians aren't going to love it. Louisianians love their families. And they just want to provide for them, especially at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And they can't do it with inflation raging. This Thanksgiving, what most Americans need the most is relief. Not just relief from inflation, but relief from bad leadership. Now, I want my friends in the Biden White House to know that I am genuinely interested in working with them to solve America's inflation problem. But you're not going to do it by spending more money. You're not going to do it by throwing gasoline on the fire. The first rule is to do no harm. Do no harm. And by that I mean that my Democratic friends should stop trying to ram this multi-trillion-dollar tax and spend bill through Congress. And they should stop it for 2 reasons. Americans don't want it, and Americans can't afford it. So, this Thanksgiving, Madam President, and I hope you have a good one, I hope my Democratic friends will give up on tying millstones around the neck of the American economy. I hope they will give up fueling inflation with another extremist spending orgy bill. And if they would do that, if they would just do that, Americans could sit down to eat next Thursday and give thanks that compassion and common sense have finally prevailed in Washington, D.C., where frankly on most issues, common sense is illegal. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could indulge me, I'd like a couple extra minutes too. It's okay.
Certainly.
Counselor, did you really say that Justice Kavanaugh was a morally bankrupt person?
Senator, as I explained, I did not write that letter. I did sign it.
Did you read it?
I read it quickly, yes.
And you
sir.
signed it?
Yes, sir.
Did you really say that Justice Kavanaugh, if he was confirmed, would cause people to die?
As I stated, Senator, I understood those statements were overheated rhetoric, but I understood them to be just
Yeah,
that,
but you said
rhetorical.
You said it, right?
I did sign the letter, yes, Senator.
Okay. Do you believe that Brett Kavanaugh is a morally bankrupt person?
Senator, sitting here as a judicial nominee, it is not appropriate for me to comment
Do you believe
personally
that,
on
well, you
any
said
justice.
it. You said it. Do you believe that he's a morally bankrupt person?
Senator, it is not appropriate for me
Why
to
not?
comment.
You said it.
I understand.
Senator, I am giving you extra time, but can she be allowed to answer?
Sure. I just want an answer. I agree that she should answer. You're not going to answer my question?
I believe I've answered it to the best of my ability. Honestly, Senator, I respect completely the confirmation process and the authority of Justice Kavanaugh
okay.
and every Supreme Court justice.
But do you, this is real simple. You said just a few years ago, you weren't in law school, you weren't in college. You said Brett Kavanaugh is a morally bankrupt person. It's clear as thunder on a summer night. Now, you're under oath. Do you believe he is or not? How hard is that? You'll have much harder questions as a federal judge if you make it that far.
I appreciate the question, Senator. As I stated, those statements were rhetorical advocacy that I signed as an alum addressing my law school alma mater. I did not.
Well, let me ask you about this rhetorical advocacy. Does rhetorical advocacy mean you said something, but now that you've been nominated, you're scared that you can't get the votes, so you're going to try not to answer the question? Is that what rhetorical advocacy means? What is rhetorical advocacy? Is it a lie?
No, it's not a lie, Senator. I would say that it's statements that are made in service of an advocacy position.
Okay. And if you issue an opinion and you get reversed by the Supreme Court, are you just going to say, oh, don't worry about it, justices, that was just rhetorical advocacy? What is this?
Absolutely not, Senator. If the court issues an opinion as a lower court judge, I would be absolutely bound to follow it. It is not merely rhetorical advocacy. It is the law of the land.
Okay, let me try one more time. Do you believe that Brett Kavanaugh is a morally bankrupt person?
Senator, as
Sitting here today, under oath.
Sitting here today under oath, I can assure you that I respect completely the authority of Justice Kavanaugh as a duly confirmed Supreme Court Justice of the United States.
Yes, ma'am, but do you believe he's morally bankrupt?
Senator, as I stated, I respect his authority and the authority of every Supreme Court Justice sitting on our court.
Yes, ma'am, but do you believe he's morally bankrupt?
My personal opinion is not appropriate for me to say. I respect his authority as a Supreme Court
So
Justice.
you think he
as I
is
do
morally
for-
bankrupt?
I did not say that, Senator.
But you signed a letter saying he was morally bankrupt.
Several years ago, as an alum addressing my law school alma mater, I did sign a letter that I believed was addressed only to my law school administration.
Oh, you
But
didn't
sitting
think
here
it would
today-
be public?
I did not understand that it would be used as a public advocacy piece. No, I
Okay.
believed it was only addressed to my law school administration.
And you signed that because you wanted to show fidelity to your alma mater, Yale Law School?
I signed it, Senator, at the time because I felt that it was an appropriate statement to make to my law school administration, notwithstanding the overheated rhetoric. But sitting here today as a judicial nominee, what I want to assure you is that as an advocate, as a litigator, as a neutral adjudicator, and as a judge, if confirmed, I would absolutely respect the authority of every Supreme Court justice and all of its precedents without reservation.
See, I don't believe you. I think you allowed your political beliefs to cloud your judgment. And I think you said a few years ago what you said about Brett Kavanaugh, and I think you believe it. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like to be a litigant in front of you with that demonstration of lack of judicial temperament and judgment. How can a litigant possibly think that you're not going to act on personal beliefs if you were so intemperate to say something like this? Last question. Are you proud of the fact that Yale Law School has a quota system limiting the number of Asian Americans? Have you ever written a letter about that? Or does that not, where does that fit in your socioeconomic view of the world that you think everybody else should adopt and you will impose if you're in a position of power?
Senator, I'm not aware of any policy like that, but what I can assure you is that I have a track record.
You need to get out more.
I have a track record as a neutral adjudicator. I have decided cases for nearly 5 years impartially by applying the law as set forth in our statutes, our Constitution, and our precedents. And I have applied that law impartially. I have ruled
You're the only
without
person in the
personal
Milky Way who believes you're impartial.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
well, yes,
Chairwoman. Dr. Fauci, I believe you have testified that you didn't give any money to the Wuhan lab to conduct gain-of-function research. Is that right?
That is correct.
How do you know they didn't lie to you?
Excuse me, sir?
How do you know they didn't lie to you and use the money for gain-of-function research anyway?
Well, we've seen the results of the experiments that were done and that were published, and that the viruses that they studied are on public databases now. So none of that was gain of function. So
How do you know they didn't do the research and not put it on their website?
there's no way of guaranteeing that, but in our experience with grantees, including Chinese grantees, which we've had interactions with for a very long period of time, they're very competent, trustworthy scientists. I'm not talking about anything else in China. I'm talking about the scientists, that you would expect that they would abide by the conditions of the grant, which they've done for the years that we've had interactions.
So you don't think the Chinese would lie to you?
Well, when you say the Chinese are a rather broad group. I know the scientists that we've dealt with have been trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. You think all the scientists have told the truth in terms of the origin of the Wuhan virus and not been influenced by the Communist Party of China, do you?
I don't have enough insight into the Communist Party in China to know the interactions between them and the scientists, sir.
Right. Why are we giving them money in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer it. Well, SARS-CoV-1 started in China, in Guangdong province, and it went from a bat to a civet cat to a human.
Yes, and excuse me, Doc, for interrupting you, but our time is so
limited. No, I'm going to be real quick.
Our time is so limited. Why are we giving money to the labs in China to study virology?
Well, I'm going to give you a rather succinct answer to that, sir.
I appreciate that.
And that's why I was saying the SARS-CoV-1, clearly the bats that have the viruses, that are the coronaviruses, are in China. As I said a couple of times, it's not in Fairfax County, Virginia, or is it in New York? It's in China. So if you want to show and study, importantly, the animal-human interface,
Because that's where the bats are.
yeah, the bats.
I got
That's
it.
where the bats
I
are.
want to be sure I understand your testimony. You didn't give money to the Wuhan lab to do gain-of-function research.
That is correct.
And you believe they didn't do gain-of-function research because they told you they didn't.
We've seen the results of the studies that they conducted, and they were not
including any
gain-of-function.
private studies.
Excuse me? Including?
Any private studies.
I'm not sure what you're getting at, sir.
Well, here's what I'm getting at. You gave them money and you said, don't do gain-of-function research.
Correct.
And they said, we won't.
Correct.
And you have no way of knowing whether they did or not, except you trust them. Is that right?
Well, we generally always trust the grantee to do what they say, and you look at the results.
Have you ever
of
had
what
a grantee lie to you?
I cannot guarantee that a grantee has not lied to us because you never know.
Yeah. Can we agree that if you took President Xi Jinping and turned him upside down and shook him, the World Health Organization would fall out of his pocket?
I don't think I can answer that question, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, do you think that the President Xi Jinping has undue influence over the World Health Organization, do you?
I have no way of knowing the influence of the president of China over the WHO.
Okay, so you think the WHO is a completely independent body, level playing field, call it like you see it, and they really want to get to the bottom of the origin of the virus. Do you believe that?
My interaction with the WHO and for Dr. Tedros, the Director General, has been one that I do believe he's a person of high degree of integrity.
I want to ask one last question. Why did you guys spike, not guys and ladies, why did y'all spike the prior administration's investigation into the origins of the coronavirus and whether it could have come out of the Wuhan lab?
Sir, we did not spike anything in the prior administration. I'm not sure what you mean by spike, but we have no influence.
The State Department spiked the prior administration's study.
But that has nothing to do with the National Institutes of Health.
So they didn't consult with y'all?
They did not.
Did they consult with you, Dr. Collins?
I read about it in the press this morning.
Doc? They just spiked it without talking to their experts? You don't want to answer that one, do you?
I just read about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Murphy.
Mr. David, let me ask you a question. How many sexes do you think there are?
How many sexes?
Hmm?
And that is what makes this rewind more revealing than it first appears. On the surface, it is simply a compilation of Senator John Kennedy's biggest moments from the year. But underneath, it becomes a study in how modern political performance works. Kennedy is not just asking questions here. He is building a character, a rhythm, and a worldview. In the exchange over the Department of Labor budget, he does not let the discussion stay in bureaucratic language. He drags it back to the ground, to roads, bridges, taxes, and the basic question of why ordinary Americans should trust Washington with more money. Even when the answers try to rise into policy abstractions, he keeps pulling them back into something visual, something immediate, something his audience can picture. Then, almost casually, he pivots to the strange image of federal survey cash and gift cards, reinforcing the broader message that government spending has drifted into something absurd. That is not accidental. It is narrative design. Then the video shifts into inflation, and the tone hardens. Here, Kennedy is no longer a committee questioner. He becomes a storyteller of economic pain. He lists prices, one after another, not as statistics alone, but as symbols of daily pressure. Gas, rent, used cars, turkey, bacon, vegetables, heating bills. The effect is cumulative. By the time he reaches Thanksgiving, he has transformed inflation from an economic indicator into a moral accusation. In his framing, this is not an unfortunate market trend. It is leadership failure with a receipt attached. He uses humor, sarcasm, and Southern bluntness, but the deeper method is emotional translation. He takes macroeconomics and makes it feel like a grocery receipt laid on a kitchen table. That is why the moment lands. It is not just partisan. It is cinematic in the way it stacks detail until frustration feels personal. The next segment changes the arena again, but not the core method. When Kennedy questions the judicial nominee about her past comments on Brett Kavanaugh, the focus becomes credibility. Here the issue is not inflation, budgets, or spending. It is whether words spoken in political heat can be escaped once someone seeks the authority of the bench. Kennedy's repetition matters. He keeps returning to the same point, asking in different ways, not because he lacks the answer, but because repetition itself becomes pressure. He wants the audience to feel the gap between what was said then and what is being said now. This is one of his signature techniques throughout the video. He turns hesitation into evidence. Even silence begins to look like confession. And for viewers, that creates suspense because the scene is no longer about legal philosophy. It becomes a trial of authenticity. Then comes Dr. Fauci and the Wuhan funding exchange, and the entire rewind reaches one of its sharpest examples of Kennedy's political instinct. He senses immediately that the public tension is not in the technical language of virology, it is in trust. So he reduces the argument to a brutally simple frame. You gave them money, you told them not to do certain research, and ultimately, you trusted them. That reduction is powerful because it cuts through expert terminology and lands on a question millions of viewers instantly understand. What happens if the people you trusted were not telling the truth? From there, he widens the emotional field by bringing in China, the World Health Organization, and the possibility of institutional deference to power. Whether the viewer sees that as sharp oversight or political theater, the result is the same. The conversation no longer belongs only to experts. It belongs to public suspicion. And that may be the real through line of this entire video. Not outrage, not even ideology. Suspicion. Kennedy's politics in this rewind are built on the idea that official language often arrives polished, cautious, and technically correct, but somehow still incomplete. He steps into that gap and performs the role of the man who refuses to be managed by jargon. That is why these clips work online. Each moment offers a familiar drama. The institution says one thing, Kennedy says he is not buying it, and the audience gets invited to stand in judgment. In digital media, that is enormously powerful because it turns passive watching into participation. The viewer is not just consuming a clip. The viewer is silently deciding who sounds real. By the time the rewind moves into the closing cultural flashpoints, the pattern is fully visible. This is not a random collection of viral Senate moments. It is a political identity reel. Budget skepticism, inflation anger, judicial distrust, pandemic suspicion, cultural confrontation. Put together, they form a larger narrative about a public figure who has learned how to compress complicated institutions into simple moral tests. Can I trust you? Are you saying now what you said before? Are you using words to explain or to hide? Those are the questions that echo underneath every clip in this compilation. And that is why this video lasts. Not because every viewer agrees with John Kennedy, and not because every exchange produces a clean answer, but because the compilation captures a style of politics that thrives in the modern attention economy. Plain-spoken, theatrical, confrontational, and relentlessly built around doubt. In the end, this rewind is less about one senator's best moments and more about what audiences reward now: clarity over caution, conflict over procedure, and emotion over institutional patience. So as this chapter closes, the real question is not just whether John Kennedy was right in these moments. The deeper question is why so many people were compelled to watch him ask them. Because when a politician can turn a hearing room into a stage and a question into a verdict, the story is no longer only about policy. It becomes about power, trust, and the performance of truth itself. And maybe that is the line that defines this entire video. In a city built on carefully chosen words, the most viral moment is still the oldest one of all. When somebody looks across the table and says, in effect, "I don't believe you." If you're still watching, ask yourself which moment hit hardest, and more importantly, why. That answer tells you as much about the audience as it does about the senator.